All right, it's another beautiful day, another moment for us to talk about business, for us to talk about finance, for us to talk about economic issues and news that are trending around the world. It's Early Exchange on Sook TV, and I am Femi Ayodele. Today is going to be an interesting conversation. I need you to get ready because we have a lot in stock for you. But let's start with news update, and Vivian is standing by to take us around the world. Vivian, how are you today?
Well, I'm very well. Thank you so much, Femi. And good morning and welcome to Morning News Update on Sook News. Like Femi said, I am Vivian Oguche. So let's delve into the realm of developmental news where innovation, progress, and positive change are at the forefront of our exploration. But before that, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Okay. Now, we start with bilateral relationship between Nigeria and the UAE as President Bola Ahmed Tinubu of Nigeria and the President of the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, have agreed to lift visa ban imposed on Nigerian travelers. This breakthrough also entails the prompt resumption of flight services by Etihad Airlines and Emirates Airlines to and from Nigeria without requiring any immediate payment from the Nigerian government. According to a statement signed by a special advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngulali, the agreement reflects President Tinubu's diplomatic efforts to promote economic development with a substantial infusion of several billion US dollars worth of investments from the UAE into various sectors of the Nigerian economy, including defense and agriculture. Moreover, both nations have established a joint foreign exchange liquidity program which will be elaborated upon in the coming weeks. President Tinubu expressed his gratitude to President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for his unwavering friendship and collaborative efforts to elevate and normalize the bilateral relationship between Nigeria and the UAE. In the meantime, the Economic Community of West Africa States, ECOWAS, has launched its joint platform for advancing cybersecurity in West Africa. This development was officially revealed through ECOWAS's official X handle. The launch aims to bolster regional cyber diplomacy, safeguarding critical infrastructure, combating cybercrime, and ensuring the sovereignty of data. In collaboration with partners, ECOWAS is organizing this event to mark the official inauguration of the ECOWAS Action Plan. This comprehensive plan is designed to elevate the region's cybersecurity capabilities and enhance its resilience in the face of cyber threats. Now, the federal government of Nigeria has expressed its commitment to improve budget meant for education by 25% with the right policies in place. The Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Mamman, disclosed this while declaring open the 2021-2022 Nigeria Annual Education Conference in Abuja. While speaking on the theme of the conference, Implementation of Education 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Nigeria, the minister pledged his commitment to bridge the gap between education policy statements and its outcome. He noted that the country had a lot of good policies on what was required to do in the best interest of the nation, but that those policies were not bringing values to the sector. Now, Professor Mohammed Ali Pate, Nigeria's Minister of Health, has commended the nation's resilient healthcare workers who continue to serve despite the significant challenges they face, including kidnappings and security concerns that plague various regions of the country. While speaking with newsmen in Abuja, the minister identified critical areas for improvement within the healthcare sector and emphasized the importance of acknowledging the remarkable efforts of healthcare professionals who, despite encountering numerous obstacles and operating with limited financial resources, persist in delivering essential services. Addressing the issue of security insecurity, Professor Pate acknowledged the perilous conditions faced by healthcare workers in rural areas across Nigeria, many of whom have fallen victim to kidnappings while fulfilling their duties. He acknowledged that while these healthcare workers are not flawless, there is substantial room for improvement, and his ministry has outlined a comprehensive plan to address these challenges, in line with his commitment to President Bola Tinubu's 4-point agenda to enhance the nation's overall health care. Professor Pate emphasized the need to enhance governance within the health sector. Also, in a bid to expand visa services to Nigerians, the British High Commission in Nigeria is set to open a new temporary submission center for UK visas in Enugu State. The center will offer visa services twice a week, providing greater convenience to applicants in the region starting from September 13, 2023, and will complement the existing centers in Abuja, Lagos, and Port Harcourt. The temporary submission center in Enugu will be designated as a premium location, offering an enhanced service package for 246,250 naira. This package includes premium lounge access, courier return, SMS notifications, general customer support, and guidance. And the British High Commission and TLS will closely monitor the demand for visa services with the possibility of expanding the service of the volume it justifies. Now, this initiative reflects the commitment to making the visa application process more accessible and efficient for Nigerian applicants. Now, away from Nigeria, Kenya's Anti-Drugs Abuse Agency has taken proactive steps to address concerns over drug addiction by investigating the use of animal tranquilizers as an alternative to heroin. While videos on social media raised concerns about individuals in a zombie-like state, the agency's findings have shed light on the issue. Contrary to earlier beliefs of fentanyl involvement, the agency's investigation revealed that the symptoms were linked to high heroin dosages, a combination of heroin, a veterinary tranquilizer, prescription drugs, and other substances. Now, the regulator's prompt response to clarify the situation and its commitment to addressing the abuse of veterinary drugs is a positive step toward managing drug overdose cases and safeguarding public health. Through its efforts, the Anti-Drugs Abuse Agency aims to protect the well-being of individuals struggling with addiction and promote a healthier drug-free society in Kenya. Now we move to Sudan, where the military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has visited Eritrea's capital, Asmara, for an official meeting with President Isaias Afwerki. Now, an official statement said the two leaders will discuss bilateral issues and the situation in Sudan and matters of mutual interest, but did not give any more details. Eritrea is the fourth country that General Burhan has visited since Sudan descended into conflict in April this year, after visits to South Sudan, Egypt, and most recently Qatar. On the 2nd of September, he ordered the reopening of Sudan's border crossings with Eritrea, a move he said would facilitate trade and movement of people between the two countries. And now, Dubai South, a visionary master development focused on aviation, logistics, and real estate, has integrated blockchain technology in partnership with Dubai Customs. Now, this positions Dubai South as the first free zone in Dubai to implement such an integration, aligning with the Dubai e-commerce strategy goals. The strategy aims to establish Dubai as a leading logistics hub and attract foreign direct investments into the thriving e-commerce sector, and the integration of blockchain technology into the customs declaration system at Dubai South helps to reduce both time and costs. Now, this advancement has already been embraced by prominent companies like RHS Logistics and First Cry in the logistics district. And other firms within the Dubai South Free Zone are following suit, highlighting the technology's appeal and benefits in enhancing supply chain transparency, data security, and privacy, while reducing fees for good transit. Dubai South's commitment to offering efficient solutions demonstrates its dedication to supporting governmental initiatives and further solidifies its role as a key player in Dubai's economic growth and development. Well, staying with the Middle East, the Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation and Olin Synthos Green Energy (OSGE) have signed a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) to explore investment opportunities in small modular reactors (SMRs) as part of their commitment to decarbonizing the Polish and European power sectors. The MOU, signed during the World Nuclear Symposium 2023 in London, aims to develop SMRs based on GE Hitachi Nuclear Energy's BWRX-300 SMR technology in Poland, the UK, and Central and Eastern Europe to meet the growing electricity demand with clean energy capacity. OSGE, which has exclusive rights to deploy BWRX-300 technology in Poland, seeks to play a key role in Poland's deep decarbonization process. And the company plans to deploy the first SMR in the country before the end of the decade, collaborating with partners from Canada and the US to implement the BWRX-300 technology. While switching some gears now, Britain and India have taken a significant step towards enhancing cross-market investment in the insurance and pension sectors through the establishment of the UK-India Pensions and Insurance Partnership. This collaborative effort, announced during the visit of British Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt to India, aims to foster the growth of these vital sectors in both nations. The partnership will focus on key areas such as knowledge sharing, the expansion of bilateral investment opportunities, and the diversification of risk within these sectors. This initiative will help strengthen the economic ties and facilitate the flow of capital between them. Well, it's time for a short break now. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Now, this is the morning news update on early exchange. German automaker BMW says the company will invest hundreds of millions of pounds into its mini factory located near Oxford, gearing up for the production of a new generation of electric vehicles, EVs. As the production of 2 new electric mini models is slated to commence in 2026 at the Cowley plant. The move is expected to secure the future of this facility as well as that of another factory in Sweden and will preserve the jobs of more than 4,000 employees. To modernize the Cowley plant for electric vehicle production, BMW will allocate £600 million to update the manufacturing lines, expand its body shop, and create a new area for battery installation. These investments aim to facilitate the UK's transition to net zero emissions and align with the country's commitment to banning the sale of new petrol and diesel-powered vehicles by 2035. Well, over now to the US, where former President Donald Trump is displaying his determination for a possible second term with an energizing message to his supporters, speaking at a rally in South Dakota. Trump encouraged his followers to engage actively in the political process to safeguard the future of their beloved country, emphasizing the importance of civic participation. In his speech, Trump addressed some of the challenges facing the nation, calling for unity and constructive dialogue. He discussed the need to address issues like immigration and COVID-19 responsibly, and with a focus on finding solutions that benefit all Americans. Trump's strong presence in the GOP primary demonstrates his enduring appeal to a significant portion of voters who appreciate his outsider status and his commitment to making America great again. This suggests a robust engagement with the political process. Meanwhile, Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim says the country is set to implement a policy aimed at banning exports of rare earth raw materials to prevent resource exploitation and ensure the nation retains the maximum value from these resources. While Malaysia holds only a small fraction of the world's rare earth reserves compared to China, the world's largest producer, this decision aligns with a broader global effort to reduce dependence on China for crucial rare earth materials used extensively in semiconductor chips, electric vehicles, and military equipment. Anwar did not specify when the export ban will be implemented, but he anticipates the rare earth industry contributing approximately $2 billion to Malaysia's GDP by 2025 and generating around 7,000 job opportunities. Now, he highlighted plans to create a comprehensive business model involving upstream, midstream, and downstream industries and product detailed mapping of rare earth element sources to maintain a strong domestic rare earth value chain. Well, let's take you to China now, where new home sales in Beijing have experienced a notable surge, with property showrooms extending their operating hours into the late evening to meet heightened demands. Now, this development reflects the Chinese government's ongoing efforts to revive the property sector, particularly in the capital city. A recent survey conducted by real estate research firm China Index Academy revealed a 16.9% increase in new home transactions by area sold in Beijing during the week of September 4 to 10 compared to the previous week. While nationwide figures indicate a 20% drop in new home transactions on average, Beijing's robust performance suggests that government initiatives are starting to yield results, at least in some select areas. This surge in new home sales in Beijing can be attributed to several government measures aimed at revitalizing the property market, such as reduced mortgage rates and down payment requirements. Well, staying with China, the legislative body, the National People's Congress Standing Committee, has proposed changes to a law that would allow authorities to fine and detain individuals for wearing clothing deemed to hurt the nation's feelings. However, critics have raised concerns about the vagueness of the amendment and its potential to infringe on citizens' rights. The harmful movement, celebrating traditional Chinese attire, reflects a rise in nationalism among the country's youth. Equally, traditional Japanese clothing, like kimonos, has faced criticism amid heightened nationalist sentiment against Japan. The proposed amendments are part of the existing Public Security Administration punishment law, and public feedback is being sought throughout September. And now President Joe Biden of the U.S. has signed a comprehensive strategic partnership with Vietnam to strengthen ties between the two nations over 50 years after the end of the Vietnam War. This partnership signifies the highest level of diplomatic relations extended by Vietnam to the United States and is part of Washington's broader efforts to bolster ties with Vietnam, viewed as pivotal in countering China's influence in Asia. The move has been well received by businesses and investors, including tech giants like Dell, Google, Microsoft, and Apple, which have increasingly shifted supply chains to Vietnam. Additionally, the partnership enhances cooperation in areas like semiconductors, electronics, and defense. This strategic partnership signifies a significant win for the U.S. in terms of expanding its influence in Asia and furthering its network of partnerships in the Indo-Pacific region. However, concerns remain about human rights and freedom issues in Vietnam. Finally, on the morning news update, strike actions at two major liquefied natural gas LNG facilities in Australia has triggered a surge in national gas prices. The strikes, driven by disputes over pay and conditions, are occurring at Chevron's Gorgon and Wheatstone plants in Western Australia. These two facilities, operated by the U.S. energy plant, collectively represent over 5% of global LNG capacity. The impact of the strikes has started to ripple through energy markets. In the UK, wholesale gas prices saw an approximately 10% increase on Friday. Analysts at NG Energy Scan noted the price rise, but emphasized that it is currently moderate, as there hasn't been a significant drop in supply. Now, Australia is a major player in the LNG export market, along with Qatar and the US. The country's LNG supplies have played a role in stabilizing global energy supplies and prices following Russia's reduction of natural gas supplies to Europe. And it is a wrap for now. Early Exchange continues. Stay with us.
All right, it's Early Exchange, and it's time for news analysis, where we'll do proper analysis of news trending across the world, talking about business, talking about economic development. And I have with me the star lady of the team, Vivian.
I don't... Femi, you're cracking me off this morning.
That introduction there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speechless. I don't know how to answer that.
I know. Glad to have you on
But
board.
good morning.
Yeah.
Rainy day.
Yeah.
I love the weather.
Oh, in Africa, that's a sign of good thing.
Really?
Yeah.
In Africa?
That's the belief, that's the perception.
Yeah, I like
that
it.
once it rains, it means blessings are at the corner.
Oh, yeah, I like optimism. It's good.
Yeah. And so, blessing is coming my way today.
Mine too.
And you.
And our chief guest as well.
Yeah. And as usual, we have Idauza in the house. Our special analyst is here. Anytime I see you here, I'm always excited. There's always this excitement. Maybe because of what you bring on board, your analysis and all that, and as usual. Glad to have you here.
Always my pleasure to be here.
All right. Good news. We have a good bilateral relationship between Nigeria and UAE. Yesterday I was excited, For like almost a year now, UAE has placed visa ban on Nigerians. The volume of businesses between UAE and Nigeria, a lot of Nigerians are concerned because they've not been able to travel to do. Nigerians love to do businesses in Dubai, because it's the haven for businesses, for tourism, and for other recreational reasons. How do you feel? I'm sure you have friends in UAE, you have stake in UAE, you should be more excited.
Oh yes, I was really, really very excited. In short, when that news broke yesterday, my son called and said, congratulations.
Oh, great.
Because, of course, I was like an important stakeholder in the UAE for him because we became very bored October, September last year, and then we have to come back to see our people because staying in the UAE and you have the pleasure of receiving your own people with fresh food every day was really exciting. Yeah. And when that ban came, of course, those privileges were almost lost, and it was not fun. Now we're happy to have that row resolved by a very excellent president. Sometime last year, when this thing started, the then Foreign Affairs Minister, Minister of Diaspora, the chairperson for the diaspora, they raised a lot of concerns, which of course for me were really challenging. That after several meetings with the UAE authorities, they came and said, well, Nigerians can travel to other countries since UAE are not opening their door. So we don't know the magic wand that the president has used this time around. But this speaks to the quality of leadership that of course is being provided. That, of course, is a man who never say die. He went in there, had this conversation. One day of his visit, the portal is open. Every flight is restored to Nigeria. And all these things in a single moment. You see, yesterday we were talking about it in the studio here, and somebody said, oh, but there was no any such indication on the president itinerary that he was going to visit the UAE. But we knew a lot would have transpired. You see, but this is the beauty of having a politician being your president. I say this every time. Since independence, Nigeria had not had the privilege of having a politician becoming their president. And this is instructive. When you look at our history, you see, after 1960, you saw Shehu Shagari, 1979, classroom teacher, not prepared. By 1999, Obasanjo came in, not prepared. We had Yaradua, came in, not prepared. They just put him somewhere and make him president. Goodluck Jonathan came in by default.
Same trend.
Same trend. Buhari came in, same, not prepared. Now, this is the first time you're having a president who understands how democracy works and is able to actually negotiate. Because politics is about negotiation. You know, in the Politics 101, they said, politics is about who gets what, when, and how. So that suggests the ability to be able to negotiate. So the president has demonstrated this very exquisite negotiation skill, and this is what is coming. Not just the opening, there are other things. As we are told that some I's are being dotted and some T's are being crossed. But I know it's going to be massive when this is done.
I did the research and I observed that or discovered that the volume of businesses between Nigeria and UAE is about $1.5 billion. Oh, yes. So with this movement or with this development, what do you expect in days to come?
Yeah, a lot is going to happen because when you get to the UAE and see, it's like you're at home. When you are in the UAE, it's like at home because see Nigerians everywhere. Both residents and visitors. So the traffic is massive. And you would have imagined the number of people who would have suffered in the last 9 months of this imbroglio. Now, people are having some sigh of relief. Because if it is not UAE, it can be UAE.
Vivian, I hope you are not planning to leave Nigeria.
Oh no, I'm very much at home here. Okay. I'm not going to Japan.
You do intend to go to Dubai and
I can just go and come back. Yeah, it's a very beautiful place to visit. Yeah. You know, I'll go come back. But you know, somebody said this is how they described what happened yesterday between Nigeria and the UAE. They said President Tinubu has fired another salvo, right? Yeah. Because it's coming on the heels of what happened at the just concluded G20 summit, where he brought on board so many businesses from the other nations. So I want you to speak to the legwork the president has decided to do himself. He practically does this legwork himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it is not at the risk of division of labor?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. You see, what the president has done is, you're leading people, you have to be in the front. You have to be in the front. So what he has done is actually like every leader will do, is to set a big picture. And then, of course, the details have to be worked out by the other people who are subordinate. Now, the minister's role is actually to assist him. You see, Nigeria didn't elect the ministers.
No.
He chose the ministers to support him. And so, it is his primary responsibility and duty to do all these negotiations where possible. And I think that is what he's doing. That every single moment that the president seizes, he wants to really convert it into an opportunity for the country. And I think it's what presidents do.
Absolutely.
You should be able to go to the negotiation table to say, this is what my country needs. And once you have been able to set the ball rolling, then, of course, your lieutenants go ahead and execute and implement. And this is where we will be speaking to the ministers themselves now. Yes, of course, this has been brokered. Then they must ensure that these agreements don't falter again, so that we don't go back to where we're coming from. So they must do their own due diligence to ensure that these things we're celebrating, that there's a follow-up, so that those funds can start to come in, and then Nigeria can begin to reap the real dividends of democracy.
Femi, before you go, I wanted to react to what Idaos had said about a politician running Nigeria, and we seeing how it's paying off right now. This also speaks to the president's agility, right? He seems to be very agile and alive and strong and silently working what he said he was going to do. I'm saying this is just putting, how will I say it? It's silencing all of his critics who had considered he was going to be ill when he came on board, right?
Yeah, and he said so. Look, I am contesting for the president of Nigeria. I'm not going to play football or going to carry any heavy load. This is a thinking work.
Yeah.
It's a mental work. And I think, of course, Nigeria can see that the man is doing the mental arithmetic, and he's actually putting things on the ground that people can see. That even the naysayers are beginning to see that, look, I think this guy is serious. Because from day one, all the decisions, all the steps taken, all are in the right directions to see how to walk Nigeria back to the pride of place among the communities of nations. So I think this is not really an energy sapping work, but it's a mind charging activity that the president himself is engaging himself in.
All right, moving on. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has launched its joint platform for advancing cybersecurity in West Africa. In recent times, the issue of cybersecurity has been of concern, and for the first time, we're seeing a kind of unity and a kind of relationship between the ECOWAS members coming up with a joint platform to tackle the issue of cybersecurity. Interestingly, our president is the chairman of ECOWAS. What does that suggest to you about the leadership and this relationship?
Well, like you have physical security. You know, yesterday we were talking about the real world versus the digital world. Now, the mode of security is also changing. We're no longer talking about border protection also. We're also talking about data protection, which is very important because this is the third real world we are in. So security is also very important and critical to the survival of ECOWAS. And of course, collaborating among member nations will go a long way in protecting the Commonwealth of ECOWAS states. And I think this is important. And of course, the president Because you see, you know people by what they have done before. His antecedent speaks for him. And you see, where as the governor of Lagos State, the first thing he championed was e-governance in Lagos. All the processes were digitized. And of course, we know that in the last few years, Oracle has been at the heart of Lagos, protecting it. And I think this is also important for the ECOWAS. Now we are even thinking about common currency. We're talking about common CBN, central bank for the ECOWAS states, just like the EU. So you find that there would be a lot to be put in place so that we can protect the asset, the financial asset of the member states. And of course, again, the president is taking the lead to ensure that these are done, that we're not just keeping our borders, but we're also protecting our digital borders.
You know, I want to remind you of what you said yesterday when we were talking about the AU being made a member of the G20 summit. You remember what you said?
Yes.
That it's a good thing, but you need to have one voice.
Voice, yeah.
But this is what ECOWAS is doing.
Yeah.
Right? This is what should be duplicated in the AU.
In AU, yeah. Really.
So does this speak to the leadership of ECOWAS?
Yeah, of course it does, because of course leadership is critical to all this. And the real reason, you see, why we have not been able to actually come together as ECOWAS, really, by now, ECOWAS would have implemented, because we have ECOWAS passports as we speak. But we have not been able to actually unify our currency because of the influence of France. And this is because many member states, especially the Francophone states, are more loyal to French government than they are to the community. Otherwise, by now, we would have been talking about ECOWAS currency. And I think the president needs to do a lot more in this regard, really, to see how we can actually relax the border rules, and then, of course, ensure that, of course, we can use single currency within the sub-region. It will just be great, and it will reduce a lot of pressure on our domestic currencies. And then, of course, you can go to Niger and spend your Eco Naira. You can go to Benin Republic. You can go to Togo and then spend same currency, and you will not need to be looking for foreign exchange in dollars to spend. And this will actually stabilize the macroeconomic dynamics within the ECOWAS states.
All right, now let's move on to education. The federal government has expressed its commitment to improve budget meant for education by 25% with the right policies in place. Now, we are seeing a move by the new minister coming on board to improve the budget allocation for education. According to UNESCO stipulation, is usually between 20 and 25% of public expenditure. Now that Nigeria is coming up with this initiative, that was what's your impression about this?
Yeah, I think we cannot but commend the minister for this initiative. The bedrock of any nation is education. The bedrock of any nation is education. Now, when you look, I keep referring to Ray Dalio's work on the 3 big circles. For prosperity to happen in any place, the starting point is always education. Once people have the right and proper education, productivity will increase. And as productivity increases, wealth will follow. Now, over the years, we have not even been able to get to that threshold that member nations have signed, because UNESCO is a global body that almost every country belongs to. In Paris in 2021, the UNESCO set a threshold that between 4 to 6% of your GDP, or between 15% to 20% of your public expenditures should be put on education. And this is to meet the SDG goal number 4 of equitable quality education for everybody and creating opportunity for lifelong learning for everybody in society. We have not been able to meet this target. And that's why we're talking about out-of-school children. This is why we're talking about lack of funding, even for our tertiary institutions, which should actually be the engine and the hub for research that can transform society. And I think these steps is in the right direction. Proper funding of education will go a long way in helping us. But I will want also to suggest that the minister, we're not just going to be putting money on education. Because we've seen this happen in the past. Because even the little that is being put there had not been properly channeled. The need to retrain and equip those who man our educational institutions is very, very paramount. We need people with clear thinking in the various disciplines who will pioneer this change that all of us envisage. Because if we follow the same paradigm, like they say, Albert Einstein says, if you keep doing the same thing and expect different results, that's what madness means. So we need to change our approach to really solving the problem of education. We need to retrain a lot of people, and we need a lot of collaborations so that people can begin to think homegrown curriculum to address our problem. Nothing worried me when I read in Lee Kuan Yew's work from third world to first world, when he said he visited Ghana and they were brandishing one young man, 32-year-old man, with a first class in classic, and he said he wondered, a country so endowed with agricultural resources had their best in classic. That was a problem for Lee Kuan Yew. And I think that should be a problem for the whole of Africa. We must understand that our problems are peculiar, and therefore the design of our curriculum should also reflect this peculiarity and uniqueness of Nigeria.
There's been this age-long crisis between ASU and the federal government, talking about the allocation for education. And over the years, there have been a series of agreements that have not been implemented. Do you see respite coming for ASU and any other organization in respect to this budget allocation?
Well,
I think it's coming in effect in 2024.
The president has solved the problem with ASU, and he said no more strike. And I think what ASU had actually been looking for had been given to them, which is autonomy. And the president says, okay, ASU, you have autonomy. Run your systems. That's where we are at the moment. You see, because the real issue that we have had over time is, especially when we get to the negotiation table, most times we run on emotion rather than objectivity. This has been the problem. I expect that ASU be the intellectual backbone of the nation, should be able to go to the negotiation table with government and tell government, look, you have to fund education, but we have a recipe for where funding is going to come from. Because it's not enough to say, government, you are not funding education. We also must be able to think about the source of this funding. Because over years, you see ASU saying to government, oh, you must fund education. And at the same breath, they are saying education must be free.
That's
or usually subsidized.
That's speaking from both sides.
Both sides of the mount.
Yeah.
So you can't go to negotiation table and say, government, you cannot increase school fees, for example. And you're saying, government, you have to put more money in education. When you can actually put one and one together and be able to actually see what's the size of our revenue. We know the number of barrels we produce a day. We can estimate that in a year and see how it fits into our national budget and see where this money is actually going to come from. So I just feel that the way they were running this conversation and agreement is that they keep putting government on their toes, especially when you are working close to elections. So that for me was a blackmail in terms of negotiation. That you push government to sign agreement which they know that they cannot implement.
Yeah.
And then you come back again to say, oh, you signed with us, you did not implement. I think this time around they should put the cards on the table. So we'll be able to say, do we need more universities? Do we need to close some down? So that we can have proper funding. Because we must be objective about our request or a demand that is put on the system. You know, they call it system. When you know David Easton's system theory, it talks about gatekeeping, how to ensure that there is not so much demand in the system so that the system will not crumble. And that's what we have been doing over the years. There's demand stress because you are asking too much of government and government does not have more money. What that means is that government will be looking for sources of money. That's why we are talking about multiple taxation, which is killing industries and is creating unemployment on the other side. And I think we must be reasonable to come to the table and say, look, what should we do? How can we do this so that everybody will have mutual benefit? I think for me, that's what should be the path to take. But the president says, as of now, you have autonomy.
Fantastic. You know, I want to take you back to what you said earlier on about the ongoing reform in the education sector, helping to reduce out-of-school children. Now, you also said it's not about pumping money into the sector.
Oh, yes.
It's also retraining the workforce.
Yeah.
How about other factors like cultural practices, societal practices, customs that are detrimental to children going to schools? For example, the Almajiri system and all of that. So while you pump money into the education system, how about awareness, sensitization, you know, in all of these areas?
Yeah, I think that's where, of course, we will need the collaboration of states, really. But we really know, and if you understand Kalman's thinking in terms of this class struggle, that sometimes some elite deliberately perpetuate ignorance so that they can continue to hold on to power. And we have seen this everywhere. That is deliberate. So you give people a level of ignorance. They don't know their life from their right, so you can continue to manipulate them. And I think we must go beyond this because the time bomb is ticking. And we have seen this worked out. My first time to travel to Kano, I think that was in 2006, to go and do a survey. I was in Sambo Gerin area in Kano, and I saw these children, all of them rushing. There were so many. And they were jumping on the waste basket outside the Sambo Gerin area. And I asked my host, what's this? Oh, he said, oh, that's what they do. They are looking for food. I said to myself, and I told her, this is a time bomb ticking. Saw children age 5, 10, 11. I said, in the next 10, 15 years, these children will be old enough to carry gun. This society will be in trouble. Now we can see what is happening in the north. Because when, like they say, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. A child that you have refused to train, of course, you know that you cannot sleep with your two eyes closed. And I think this is what we must realize, that we need to create an ecosystem where everybody can prosper, and then we can have our peace.
All right. I wish you could talk on and on because it's always my delight having you around.
Absolutely.
But don't worry, you have another time tomorrow. It's a pleasure having you around, Ada.
Thank you.
Thank you, Femi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you so much.
On that note, we'll take a short break, and when we return, the discussion will start. Don't go away.
Urbanization, a journey that began around ancient Mesopotamia in the Uruk period, has evolved into a complex economic network involving governments, urban planners, businesses, and urban populations. This process has witnessed a continuous rise in its economic influence since the Industrial Revolution, gaining significant momentum in the 20th century and shaping the global economy in the 21st century. People flock to cities in search of job opportunities, entrepreneurship, and economic advancement as cities continue to serve as hubs for innovation, propelling economic growth through research, technology, and thriving industry clusters. Their concentrated populations allow for efficient resource allocation, enabling economies of scale in services, infrastructure, and resource utilization. With these areas attracting businesses, creating larger consumer markets that drive economic activity, further fueled by cities, aim to offer improved living standards and access to essential amenities, ultimately enhancing overall well-being. However, migration into cities poses both opportunities and challenges. Rural to urban migration is motivated by economic opportunities but strains housing, infrastructure, and social services, leading to informal settlements and social integration challenges. The informal economy, including street vending and small-scale manufacturing, is vital in urban areas, providing flexibility for marginalized individuals but often lacking job security, fair wages, and social safety nets. To navigate these complexities, urban areas need comprehensive plans, mixed land use zoning, affordable housing initiatives, and public-private partnerships for infrastructure development. Providing social services, affordable housing, and education opportunities for migrants is vital. Also, policies that integrate migrants into urban society are essential. Formalizing and regulating informal businesses, extending financial services to informal workers, and offering support for transitioning to the formal economy can promote economic growth and resilience in urban settings. Alfreda Ambe Bassi, Souk News.
All right, if you're just joining us, it's still your early exchange and the discussion is about to start. In recent times, I've been concerned about the informal economic sector, and today we'll be looking at the economy of urbanization, what it portends, the inherent potentials, and our guest will be joining us shortly so that we'll have a proper discussion. Vivian, in recent times, I've been concerned about urbanization, you know, looking at the economic side of it. For instance, let's look like a city like Lagos. You discover that contrary to the master plan, what you have on ground is different. And over the years, you see that the city has been evolving just like any other city due to changes, human behavior, environmental factor. You have big cities like Port Harcourt, like Kano, who started on a smaller note. But over the years, because of the economic activities, the commercial activities taking place, you discover that the facilities are overstretched. And then you discover that public transport becomes a problem. Like, for instance, in Lagos, you have a population of about 20 million people. And now Lagos has grown, has evolved over the years. So the facilities, when it comes to public transport, are overstretched. What do you think as
some of the factors responsible?
Yes,
I mean, one of the very glaring factors responsible is rural-urban migration. For example, everyone wants to come to Lagos.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to go to Abuja.
Be
Everyone
part
wants
of
to
the
go,
national
everyone
cake,
wants to go to Port Harcourt, all kind of the big cities. So you have a population explosion. You know, that's why you see a building that was originally meant to be a one-story building will be turned into a four-story building. And then what happens? You start having building collapse and everything. So what starts as, you know, something harmless becomes critical. So at the end of the day, sticking to the master plan is the key. But how easy is it? Which brings me to what is happening in the Federal Capital Territory right now, where they are calling him Hurricane Wiki, right? Where he's pulling he's pulling down structures because he wants to take this
Stick to the master
yes,
plan.
the master plan and all of that. So I think enforcement, you know, it's key if you want to maintain such glories. Really.
You see this trend, you know, an average graduate is coming to either Lagos, Abuja, or now by extension, let's say Port Harcourt and Kano, because they feel there's something in these cities that can benefit their career.
Do you agree with them?
Yes, I agree with them.
So there's nothing in the rural area?
No, the point is you have more opportunities in these cities. For instance, you as a media practitioner, you might not likely have more opportunities in your village. But when you get to a city like Lagos, you have more TV stations, you have more radio stations, you have more media platforms. So there's tendency for that migration. Whatever profession you find yourself. In fact, most of these agencies, most of these private organizations, their headquarters are either in Abuja or in Lagos. And everybody wants to be in touch with the center.
But Femi, flip the coin.
Yeah.
If these headquarters now are moved to the rural areas, what happens?
Yeah, people migrate.
Absolutely. So what if you now begin to create opportunities in the rural areas? I will stay in my village because life is far, far easier there and cheaper for me.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Interestingly, a lot of people would love to be in the corner of their village.
Yeah,
For
where I
instance,
eat fresh food, fresh,
you know,
yeah.
take pounded yam in my village.
Take pounded yam.
You know, if you stay somewhere in Ogun State, take your, what do you call it, Gary, Ijebu Gary and all that. People will love that kind of comfort, being in their comfort zone. But the challenge here is the disparity between the facilities that are available in the rural areas and then in the urban areas. And as long as these realities are there, people will migrate. Because an average human being seeks for better life. You want greener pastures. That's why people japa, people travel.
Yeah.
Because they tend to have this feeling that the environment there is better. The enabling environment is better. And for an average business person, you're thinking of how your business can thrive. If you feel your business is going to thrive in a city like Lagos, you might likely migrate because your customers are there, the market are there already because of the demands, the forces of demand and supply. If your product is being demanded in a particular place, there's tendency you move there because you want to make some gains. And that's the essence of that. It's a whole lot of factors contributing to these economic factors, financial factors, natural factors, social factors. For instance, you don't have airport, the luxury of using the airport in all the rural areas you have around, or the remote areas. But you have the airport in the big cities. If you need to travel now, you might not likely come to my village because there's no airport there. We're hoping to have one soon, and I won't tell you where I'm from anyway.
Okay, because I was going to ask you.
But the truth is, if I need to travel to UK, to US, I have to come to Lagos because the international airport is here. I have to come to Abuja. I have to go to Port Harcourt. So these are the issues. If every governor continues to look at ways to expand the facilities in their state, make every state, the 36 states in Egypt, they are working. There will be need for you to stay in your state and you'll have a better life for it.
Absolutely. Femi, I want to say that there are exceptions to the rule. Do you know that there are some very few people who they discover the need in a particular rural area, they leverage on it, start a business, and are doing quite well.
Yeah.
They even have a monopoly on it because, Lagos doesn't do it for them. They have a vision and they follow it, right? On the flip side, you have some people who leave rural areas to come to Lagos or all these major cities and end up being jobless. And then you have people on the streets. You have the homeless and you have the jobless. So by the time government takes a holistic look at it, and then people really begin to understand that coming to Lagos is not it. You have to do your homework first.
That's it. Do you know the last time I traveled to my village, I observed a trend where the younger people are no longer around. They're no longer in those areas.
Like in your village?
Just like in any other rural area,
Okay.
you discover that because they feel other moving to Lagos, Abuja, to Port Harcourt, they also want to join the trend. And what happens is that, skills level from the rural area to the urban area, what that means is there's a vacuum in the rural area. There are things that you expected young people to do in the villages and the remote areas, and then you discover that there's a vacuum because they're thinking of migrating to Lagos. And what happens is the economy in that place also suffered suffers for it. So it's a trend that has to be corrected. Even for those in the big cities like Lagos, Port Harcourt, that they are thinking of traveling to UK. In recent times, if you check the trend of Japa, Nigerians are eager to go to either UK, Canada, or US. If you check the trends, those three countries, they are of attraction to Nigerians. And if you check the statistics, figure has shown that in recent times, even after COVID, post-COVID, the migration to UK, US, to Canada, because they have, in fact, the labor force, we check the age group or the age bracket of people moving from Nigeria to those countries, they fall into the age bracket of the labor force. And what that means is there's, because of brain drain, they're moving to other countries. There's a gain for those countries. Our experts are moving out, doctors are moving out, our surgeons are moving out, our academicians, our professors, they are seeking greener pastures because they feel the facilities are there. If you see, even as far as UAE is concerned, doctors are well paid. And so there's tendency for an average doctor in this part of the world, in Africa, to think, okay, if an average doctor, like maybe a colleague, is earning more or times 5 of what I'm earning in Africa, why do I need to stay in Africa? And they make it so attractive that the incentives are there. Once you're there, your salaries are being paid. Not like here where salaries are being owed. You have a situation, we talked about Sue earlier, owing salaries, and then you have the issue of not getting the right allowances, and then the agreements are not being implemented. But you get overseas, you're being given a preferential treatment, especially if you belong to the class of a professor. You have this attention, this respect, this prestige, but give it to Nigerians. We have the brain.
We do. Femi, before you introduce the guest, though, I would like us to also know that it's not all rosy over there.
Yeah,
some months ago, some reports came on board where healthcare workers from Nigeria who had migrated to the UK were lamenting and crying that they were dying of labor, they were overworked and all. So before you jackpot, you probably have to think twice.
You have to think.
Yeah.
All right. Alan, we have the guest now. We're being joined by Umar Ahmed, who is a town planner, is going to help us do justice to the topic talking about urban informal sector. Umar, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange.
So thank you for having the Early Exchange program.
Okay. All right. I would like you to do a background, like an analysis and understanding for our viewers to understand what does it take when you talk about in the informal economic sector, talking about economy of urbanization, the informal sector. I would like you to do a background assessment and a background explanation for our viewers to understand what it takes when you're talking about informal urban economy.
Okay, thank you very much. From the word go, informal economy, what comes to mind? Okay, what comes to mind is, okay, having menial jobs, people having menial jobs in an urban area, point blank, you get. And these menial jobs cut across all stratas of from drug deals to having what's it called? Having illegal kiosks and what's it called? And a number of others, legal kiosks and what to use now, legal kiosks and all sorts of trying to make ends meet. Actually, that's what I'm trying to say. People, no sooner you see in an urban settlement trying to have an illegal kind of not illegal per se, because there's no wages accrued to these form of sales or form of whatever thing they're doing to get. There's no if it comes across to urban crime, so you get there's no form of wages accrued. That means you're not getting, the government doesn't know about them most times. There's no tax levied upon them.
All right,
there isn't
Ahmed,
so
sorry to cut you short. Let's go on a short break now, and when we return, we'll have more discussion with Ahmed. Stay with us. All right, it's still early exchange, and we're looking at urban informal sector, and we've been speaking with Ahmed. Shortly, he's going to join us for us to have more engaging discussion. But Vivian, talking about the informal urban sector, it has to do with the sectors that are not being regulated. You have this pattern where you have shanties, you have slums springing up in cities. In fact, it looks like a natural thing. Irrespective of how good the urban planning is, you observe this trend that shanties are springing up somewhere. You have this group of people who will just gather somewhere, start a community, and before you know it grows to a city and it becomes a problem. Check, all around Lagos, Abuja, you see that informal kind of arrangement.
You know what comes to mind?
Yeah.
Makoko in Lagos. Have you been there?
Yeah, I've been there. We
It's
did a
underwater.
documentary
Right.
Recently.
These people say there is no amount of money you will give them that they will live there. But it's not even a very healthy environment. I don't even want to delve there. But they are happy with the way they are living. So one of the things I'm going to ask Omar is, how do you handle situations like that? Because like your description was perfect. They just come together and decide that they want to form a community, and then the shanties come up, and then before you know, it grows into a city.
Do you know what interests me about those people is the effrontery, the courage, the boldness to go ahead with this, the willpower. You just find yourself in your place, and then you turn yourself to another urban planner, you create an enclave for yourself, create a space for yourself. And you know the interesting thing? They bring their families, they bring their friends, and before you know it, it expands. In fact, they will now start having chiefs. Start having, leaders, community leaders, give themselves names. And interestingly, even the community leader, administration will start with power. He just wanted to flex his muscle. But I feel it is not about the individual. It's about the plan on ground. If you look at what El-Rufai, the last one, he has this ambition of building on that master plan. Some people you see them building on waterways, building on where it shouldn't be. And then you wonder, why are these things in place in the first place? There are people in the ministry who should supervise. In the first place, why was this kind of approval gotten from the ministry?
That's where you should start from.
That's why I said it's a combination of several factors. You
Yes.
have people who are supposed to do their responsibility, now oversight function. If, for instance, as a civil servant or a public office holder, you were expected to play by the rule, and somebody brings a plan for you to approve, your conscience should tell you that, oh, we have a master plan. This shouldn't be where it should be. But, like we always say, corruption, maybe that's also an element of it where people don't do what they are supposed to do, where they allow the love of money to cloud their reasoning. And then instead of being objective, they are now being subjective. So it's a lot of factors, and these are things I guess we talked about.
So one of the things I'll also be asking Ahmed about is, how do you bring good out of this kind of situation? For example, if you want to reorganize a community like Makoko, so you don't render people homeless, what is the right way to go about it? Because he is a town planner, right? So that's one of the questions.
Even in that kind of situation, I think another issue to contend with, like you said, people who have decided, I'm going to be here.
You are not taking me
Jupiter, nothing will move me from here. No federal government, no matter how mighty you are. That decision is there. They are satisfied, they are comfortable with that way of life. It's just like an average village person would tell you, even if you take me to UK, you can't take the village from me. So you have this impervious mindset that, oh, whatever it is, I am going to stay here. I created this community for myself, or my forefathers handed over this community or this shanties over to me, and I'm going to sustain it. All right, Ahmed is ready for us. He's a town planner. Ahmed, glad to have you join us once again on Early Exchange. All right, earlier you were talking about... Ahmed, can you hear me?
Yeah, very well, sir. Astute.
Okay, great. Glad to have you join us once again.
Thank you, sir.
So earlier you were talking about what urban informal sector is all about. I would like you to take that journey now. I would like you to talk about, to give a background understanding for our viewers to have a proper knowledge of what urban economy is all about.
Thank you very much. Urban, urban and informal urban economy cuts across all stratas, from marketing to squatter settlements, like to housing you get, and amidst others. So, but I'll start by let's say an informal sector very well. We mean that uh, people uh, involve themselves with not necessarily things that are handled by government and trying to make ends meet. And most times there's a backlash because a backlash rather because this economy pose a threat. The informal economy actually pose a threat. It can either make or mark um, the given environment. Moving forward again as well, informal sector, urban area will mean that okay, there's an influx of people from the rural settlement to the urban area, and as such, these people are coming with new traits, new dealings, get because it cuts across even urban crime, get there's like a bank heist regiment, get and a host of others. Um, regardless, not knowing that okay, no eyes on them and stuff. Yeah, they lack no basic information as to how informal economy is supposed to be like, or how a formal economy runs. It's not like the regular suit and tie kind of thing or the white collar kind of job people you see. They are see them involving in things that are not really approved by the government in the society. And speaking about like the regiments, or no sooner I read in a gazette in the Lagos some years back, some some personnel just come in, dressed like put on a khaki and in the Molly kind of car and come stop and take some people at every what's it called at every interval. You get they come pick up people as if they are as though what's it called security personnel. So you see such kind of a menace means that this is it needs to be checked because this is like an urban, it's like an informal kind of a menace. Moving forward again as well, by and large, a squatter settlement again, it's infringed inside the an informal sector like there's battle for space where to put the head and stuff. Like I say in Kano, for example, yeah, I'm going to use this Kano as a case study. No sooner I went to what's it called, Kopan, so I saw a lot of people under the bridge. Like man, I was like, this is how Kano is. Wow, thousands of people, gazillions of people, trying to make ends meet. Yeah, involving informal sector kind of businesses. Selling used phones. You get, I know. Okay, like I said, it can make or mark. So you see, this is like a make, but what about the one third of this quota that would how bad influence like a lot of people and head count and lost count. I don't know what they call I don't know what head kind of counting is, but then that was not done. So I was like, wow, when this stuff became over, I was like, yeah, it's something I actually want to talk about and speak about on. Plus, I think there's a need for a proper enlightenment and enlightening as to how to go on about curbing these menace because if the what's it called the growth rate is increasingly getting to like a superimposed 3% ahead from the 2.7 that it used to be in Nigeria because I'm checking out I don't know how much I cannot very give a figure on how what the government population figure in Nigeria is right about now. But you see,
All right.
population kind of aspect that makes these menace go on and on. And you see, the urban sprawl keeps people tend to settle in fringes and outskirts and fertile alluvial soil where they aren't supposed to even stay for living or for survival, because these are actually buffer zones. Yeah, you don't stay. So if there's a proper a master plan, oh, there's actually a master, there's an existing master plan actually, but if these master plans can be put in place, there's a master plan. Okay, master plan. How a master plan works? Okay, where it's supposed to be meant for like settlement, the settlement, where is the central business district, also alias CBD, is a CBD, where there's an incinerator, is an incinerator, the checkpoint, a
All
check
right,
post, is a
Ahmed,
check
now
post, yeah,
we have to
all
wrap up now. Ahmed,
very
thank
well.
you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. That's
Thank
Umar
you.
Ahmed, who is a town planner. Thanks for sharing your thoughts
Yes,
with
sir.
us.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for having me on this, sir.
All right, we'll go on another break and we'll return to talk about more about economic planning, urban economic planning. Don't go away, just stay with us.
You're welcome back. Still on Early Exchange. We just talked with Usman Ahmed, a town planner, and now we have on board another guest, and this promises to be an explosive session. So before we even introduce our guest, we are going to be talking about sustainable cities. Now, when it comes to sustainable cities, it's not just Femi. I'm bringing Femi on board before we bring our guest on board. Yes, before. When you talk about sustainable cities, it's not just any kind of city. You're talking about an eco-friendly city. You're talking about a green city. You're talking about a city that is all-inclusive. Now, this is not something that was applicable.
The thing in life is change. For instance, we're making reference to Lagos. When Lagos started, it was just smaller to what it is compared to now. So a sustainable city is a kind of arrangement, concept whereby we put plans in place for that city to be able to adapt to the growth expected when it comes to economic growth, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to social activities.
When it comes to climate change.
Climate change, you know, because it will always be a factor. In recent times, the discussion has been around climate change, whereby the forces of nature is playing out. And then there's a need for humankind to put policies in place, to put things in place to ensure that the changes that are happening in terms of temperature, in terms of the weather pattern, are being managed in a situation where you have an eco-friendly environment in a way that it will not impact either negatively or positively on human activities. It's a reality that we have to live with. So a sustainable city has to put all these plans in place. Earlier we were talking about Abuja, whereby the vision of the founding father is to ensure that Abuja has that kind of sustainability. So for it to retain that status, it has to be, you know, monitored over the years, and that's why you see each minister coming on board to ensure that they stick to the master plan. Alan, the guest is ready for us. Vivian.
Okay. So it's time now for us to introduce our guest. Femi has already done a little bit of your job, Desmond Majakudumi. So as we bring you on board, you probably have to say thank you to Femi for starting what we were bringing you on board to do. But Desmond, if you can hear me, we're talking about sustainable cities. And this is not your first time on Sook TV. I was going to do what's it called, a red carpet welcome for you, but this is not your first time. I will say thank you for joining us again. So if you can see and hear me, we are talking about sustainable cities, and it is expected that by 2030, 2/3 of the world population, that's 5 billion people, will live in a city, presenting countless global challenges affecting urban inhabitants and the wider environment. What's your take on this?
Well, my take is that it's a fantastic business opportunity for those who are in any type of development sector, from the architects to the town planners to the contractors to people who just add value to the urban development, especially if they are involved in the sustainability aspect of it, because this is now the new buzzword in business. This is now the new buzzword generally, just in development. It has to be done sustainably. It can't be just done in a way that will wreck the very environment. Remembering that the word environment is actually just a short word to encompass what it really is, and that is our life support system. You know, everything that keeps us alive, it comes from the environment. If the environment is not healthy, we cannot be healthy. And this is what we're seeing in this massive urban development that is going on, that has been in the past not done on a sustainable way. So it's a great opportunity for young people and even the not so young to now start to learn how to do things in a sustainable way, because population is growing. It's growing massively, almost exponentially, and people have to live somewhere, so they're going to develop their abodes for where to live. But it has to be done in a sustainable way. It has to be done in harmony with nature. It has to be done in a good way for the environment to be able to continue with its job, which is to supply our essential life support systems.
All right, Desmond, glad to have you on board once again. I've always been looking forward to this discussion. I would like you to paint for us a picture of what a sustainable city should look like. What are the features? What are the things that a sustainable city should have or cities should have? I would like you to paint that picture for our viewers to really have a proper understanding of what we're talking about when it comes to sustainable city.
That is, in fact, the key question. You know, what are we talking about? What does it mean? Well, the picture behind me is a good example, except that it is actually just a picture. And if you're in a real sustainable city, what would be behind me is maybe just a window, and outside the window, you would see these green edifices, massive trees, and so on and so forth. And in some cities in the world, they have made sure that they maintain green space. It's always a challenge because you can imagine cities like New York, cities like London, where the value of the real estate is some of the highest in the world. They have huge parks. They have Central Park in New York, they have Hyde Park, Regent's Park in London. And in fact, London is actually one quarter green space. Yes, one quarter of London, UK is actually green space. And this helps tremendously to give it that sustainability adaptation. It helps it to be able to be called a sustainable city. Green space, it's one of the key elements. And you just have to sacrifice the economic gain for the gain of being able to make the place healthy and make the environment conducive for supporting healthy life. But that's just one aspect of it, okay? Very, very key, very, very important. You've got to have the green space. You know, nature has been doing this for eons upon eons upon eons. Nature is in harmony with herself, and it's, you know, a circular system, a circular system. What goes up eventually comes down. It goes into the ground, and it supports those things which will come up out of the ground again. A circular, sustainable system. Okay, so that's your green space. Okay, but apart from that, in the construction industry, like I mentioned a bit earlier, you have to be using materials that have low carbon footprint. Okay, a classic example is the way we produce our cement these days. Okay, cement, to be able to be effective, the way we produce it requires tremendous amounts of heat, tremendous amounts of mining, and so on. And this has a negative impact on the environment because it is not done in a way that is sustainable. It's not done in a way that is environment friendly. So it has a very negative impact. It has what they call a high carbon footprint. What are we talking about? We're talking about something that emits a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And this carbon dioxide that's going into the atmosphere has actually brought planet Earth to a critical junction. It has brought humanity into a crisis. It's brought humanity into an unprecedented situation. The example of that is that July 2023 was recorded as the hottest year ever recorded in human history. And 2023 itself looks as if it's going to be the hottest year, if not amongst the hottest years, which have all taken place in the last 10 years. Scientists warned us that this is what would happen if we continue polluting the atmosphere with millions and millions of tons of carbon dioxide. So when you're producing your cement for your buildings in your city, if the cement has a high carbon footprint, that is in the production process, We are producing massive amounts of CO2. This is not sustainable, and we cannot continue that way. Likewise, energy systems that are used for bringing light and power into the urban area, they also must now start having low carbon footprint. Again, what are we talking about? We're talking about what do we burn or what do we do to produce the energy that gives us our light, our heating, our cooling, and so on. If it is just based on burning fossil fuel, that is oil, petrol, or derivatives of oil, that is petrol, diesel, and even gas to an extent, especially also coal, then this also adds a lot to the carbon footprint and also causes a lot of toxins to be in the city. And that's one of the reasons why, if you check medical records from hospitals, you'll find that in the urban areas, the hospitals there have a lot of cases that are linked to unhealthy atmosphere, lung diseases, and cancer, and so on, as opposed to people who are living in the rural areas. So, reducing your energy for your city has to have a low carbon footprint. Those are two of the, or three of the major issues in terms of what you need to do to make your city sustainable. There are many more, but maybe you want to discuss other aspects of it.
Yeah, definitely we have to discuss other aspects. But what you just described is the volume of environmental air pollution in urban areas, right? So let's talk about combating it. How do you combat environmental pollution in urban areas, since we are talking about sustainable cities? Now, I see that backdrop, your picture with lots of trees. Would that be one of the ways you can combat air pollution?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, we just take nature, we take the trees very, very much for granted. But if we analyze the value that these incredible, miraculous aspects of the miracle of creation, if we analyze the value that they give, it is astounding. And it is cause for humility and reverence to the whole miracle of creation. The trees are absorbing our carbon dioxide, which all of us give off. And in return, they are emitting oxygen, without which we cannot survive for 5, 10 minutes maximum. Wow, our most essential commodity is coming from the trees, but they're also filtering particulates that could be in the atmosphere from the various polluting activities that we're perpetrating into the atmosphere. They absorb a lot of these particulates as well. So they also clean the air and they vaporize the atmosphere as well. Forests do wonderful things in terms of transmitting this vapor so you can have rainfall that will continue to fall inland and inland. So every major city should actually be close to some kind of woodland or some kind of little forest. In some places, they have tiny forests right in the middle of the city, which is what we have at our Lufasi Nature Park after Aja, a agroforestry farm that was converted into a park. It's a tiny patch of forest, but it does wonders for the atmosphere. And developers are so anxious to build their estates around our park because it adds tremendous value to the estates that they are building. So definitely the green spacing, the green activity is very, very necessary. Activity in the sense of planting green and also encouraging people, even if you don't have much space, put a few trees, make sure you have a few plants in your compound. Don't just concretize the whole compound. I know it's convenient because you don't have to be cutting the hedges or cutting the grass and so on, but it's good for your health. Make sure you have green space inside your compound and a few small trees. You can even put trees that will give you fruits. You can put pawpaw, you can put different types of small trees that will give you fruit. And if you don't have a compound, you don't have a garden, well, I'm sure you will have a balcony and you can put flower pots on your balcony. And if you don't even have the balcony, you at least should have a window ledge, and you can put little pots or little jam jars, little jars on your window ledge and plant little things there. So green, 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 that is very, very important to make the urban space healthy. But apart from that, the main ingredient for us to have this sustainability, to have this healthy lifestyle, it comes from our minds, it comes from our thinking. We have to reorientate our focus. We have to reorientate our thinking into realizing our constitutive role as the most advanced, the most developed species on this earth with this incredible brain capacity. Our role is to be caring for the creation. And this is not me talking. I am not qualified to say that, although it is very logical. This is direct quotation from scriptural injunctions. All the major scriptures of this world, particularly, especially in Nigeria, the Holy Bible, the Holy Quran, or in other parts of the world, the Bhagavad Gita, the Jewish sutras, all the major scriptures emphasize that the role of the human being is to do what? Replenish the earth. We are caliphs. We are stewards of creation. And it is quite logical that we should be injuncted to replenish our life support system. So we need to get that into our minds. And sometimes it's a challenge because the desire to maximize your profit is a natural desire. We all want to have a good life. We all want to be able to give ourselves the things that will make our life comfortable. And these things don't always come so easy, so cheap. However, you cannot continue to put profit ahead of people and planet. And this has been the challenge. This is what is going on. We have maximized the profit margin, the profit desire to such a high degree that we are even ready to compromise good health. We are ready to compromise people's good health and good well-being. This is what is going on all over the world, not just here in Lagos or in Nigeria. And now the United Nations and the big top thinkers, especially amongst the hierarchy of the scientific community, the major geologists, the climatologists, the space research people who are able to see the Earth from a different perspective, they are all telling us that we can no longer be going down a pathway that will lead to catastrophic consequences. And we're already seeing the indications of that. We haven't reached the edge of the cliff yet, but we need to slow down. And the Secretary General of the United Nations is telling us that we're not slowing down, that we're heading towards a cliff which will give us catastrophic consequences, and our foot is still on the accelerator. But good people are now urging us human beings to have a renewal of our minds, a change of attitude, where we will put people first, and then the planet, and then, of course, the profit can come. After all, is that not the primary injunction of any scripture that is worthwhile calling itself a scripture? That we should love our God and love our neighbor. And how can we be profound or professing to be expressing love for our neighbor if we're wrecking our life support system? So it's a matter of attitudinal change. Humanity has come to a very, very interesting time in its evolution, whereby we now have to change our attitude and have a far more caring attitude towards each other and do what is right in terms of our development, especially the urban development. We got to do the right thing. We got to make sure that we are nurturing nature, even in the middle of the city. And the things that we're using to construct our homes, to construct our abodes, and so on, these things have to be acquired in a sustainable way, not in a way that is damaging to the environment, not in a way that is harming nature, harming the environment, which is our very life support system.
Sorry to butt in. Let's talk about the issue of climate change now. You agree with me that is a reality we have to live with. Now, I need you to talk about how much of threat or challenges this will pose to the plan to urban sustainability?
Yeah, climate change is a it's a massive challenge. It's a massive challenge. Let's take the example of Lagos State alone. Okay, geographic location of Lagos, huge, long coastal area. Okay, um, a lot of Lagos has the ocean on one side and has lagoons on the other side with streams running through it. Lagos is a very low-lying terrain. In some areas of Lagos, it's almost below sea level. It's low-lying. Where we are in Lekki, Victoria Island, so many parts of Lagos is low-lying. A lot of swampy areas, a lot of mangroves, and so on. Okay? Now, climate change is causing extra heating. Okay? It's global warming that is actually causing the climate change, to put it more precisely. Okay? We're heating up the planet beyond its average temperature, beyond its time honored normal temperature. Okay, the planet has been operating like this for eons and eons and eons because of this fixed temperature that it has. It doesn't go too low, averagely, it doesn't go too high. You as a human being, if you're feeling very, very hot and you take your temperature and it's high, you know it's a symptom of sickness. Okay? So what we are doing is we're causing sickness to the planet. We're disturbing its capacity to be able to maintain life as we know it in the long term. In the short term, we're getting things like ice caps melting. Okay, there's areas of this planet that have millions and millions of square meters or square kilometers of ice. Okay, and it's been there from time immemorial almost. But because of this global warming that is causing the climate change, it's also causing the oceans to heat even more than the atmosphere, and the ice caps are melting. And when those ice caps, when they melt, the water goes into the ocean and it makes the ocean rise. If you see the scenario on Lagos coastline right now, you know that from Okoafa all the way down past Lafiaji and down the coast, in the last 2 months only, we have lost in some areas 22 feet, okay, of coastline to the ocean, totally eroded. In the last 10, 15 years, we've lost in some areas almost 150 meters. Thousands and thousands of coconut trees that were lining our coast have been washed away totally. Okay? And meanwhile, you're getting more flooding coming in from the lagoons because the amount of water that is being released upland is increasing because the rain is increasing. And that is just a manifestation of simple science that you learn in your mother's kitchen. You know, when you apply heat to water, the water evaporates. More heat, more evaporation, more rain. Global warming is causing this situation. Places like Lagos are under a very severe risk unless the necessary measures are taken to curtail this global warming and to adapt to the climate change situation that we're already in, which means protecting our coastline. We saw an example of that protection with the Eco-Atlantic development, which protected Bar Beach. Bar Beach was getting washed away. The whole Victoria Island would have been underwater now if this protective measure had not been put in place. But it needs to be extended all the way down our coast in order to protect us from one of the most immediate threats of this climate change. Oh, and as if that wasn't enough, that's just the coast here, Lagos. What of in the north? The desert is moving in relentlessly, relentlessly, because water holes have been dried up. Too many of the trees there have been cut, and the rain is not falling the way it used to be. Again, another symptom of the climate change, the global warming And as that desert moves in, the implications are very, very terrible because people who lived there for generations and generations can no longer find a decent livelihood in that location. So this is yet another symptom of this climate change. And it's like nature telling humanity that, look, you're doing this to me. I must give it back to you. You know, one thing I learned as a farmer was that when you plant cassava, you know, go harvest cocoa, yam, whatsoever you do, you shall surely reap the consequences. Again, this is scripture talking to us. You know, it's be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever you sow, you shall reap. And we are sowing this negativity into nature. So she's obliged to give it back. And that's why at our Lopasi Park, we have a motto. And that motto is loving nature. When you
Loving
come
nature.
there, you just chill and you love nature. And in order to be loving nature, you have to have a loving nature, like you
Absolutely.
two wonderful presenters on this program.
Thank you so much. So let me come in here, Desmond. You said you can't plant cassava and expect to reap cocoyam, right? Let's talk about land reclamation. Well, Femi and I talked earlier on about rural-urban migration and how there's population explosion and how cities have to be expanded. And now we're talking about sustainable cities. Land reclamation, does it pose a threat to sustainable cities?
A massive, massive threat if it is not done in the right way. Because we have to look at, you know, what are we doing? Okay, land reclamation. So what does that mean? That means we're reclaiming land. Okay, reclaiming it from what? Okay, from the mangrove area, from the muddy area, sometimes known as poto poto. And maybe that's part of the challenge because when we think of poto poto, it sounds like something that has no value. It's just, it's just mud. It's just, which one did that? It's poto poto. It is actually one of the most valuable aspects of the ecosystem. Again, another aspect of the miraculous nature of creation. This so-called poto poto, known as the mangrove. Oh, what does it do? So many things. It absorbs excessive rain because times will come during the course of the years where one year will have a heavier rainfall than some of the previous years. This is some of the natural cycles that the earth goes through. You have your El Nino, you have your La Nina, slight cooling, slight heating, a natural cycle that occurs on 3, 4 year, 5 year cycles. But the mangroves are constructed or they are there in such a way that they can actually absorb excessive water that comes in. And not only do they absorb this water and prevent flooding to the slightly higher areas, but they also clean the water. And apart from cleaning that water and purifying it, the mangroves themselves are a wonderful, wonderful habitat for breeding of crustaceans and other aquatic fauna. A lot of the fish that we catch in our lagoons and even in the ocean, they actually come into the mangroves to lay their eggs, and that's where the spawn, that's where it hatches. So they play this wonderful role of nurturing fauna in the mangrove area. And also, when we're talking of this carbon footprint, the CO2, the mangroves are one of the most effective sequesters of CO2. They bring down a lot of carbon dioxide that is emitted, naturally. As you said, mammals give off CO2, and a lot of things in nature absorb it. Mangroves are one of the great absorbers of CO2. So when we now reclaim this mangrove, what we're doing is we're destroying its capacity to offer the natural ecosystem services that it offers, which we have just listed. We're destroying that capacity. because we want to have our development. And, the use of that terminology for that is questionable because how can it really be development if you're destroying the life support system capacity of one of the aspects of the miracle of nature? Remember, this planet is a miraculous entity, and you just have to compare it to the hundreds of millions of other planets that have now been observed, through our space traveling and through our space observation. And all the indications are so far, this is the only one that has the capacity to support life. So it is definitely miraculous. So can you call it development when you're wrecking the life support capacity of this miraculous planet? So yeah, so the reclamation is, it can be done but it has to be done very, very carefully. And when you do it, make sure that you
All
at
right,
least
Desmond,
are
we're due
replacing
for a
some of
break.
the important aspects that the mangrove can give, like the drainage. Make sure you have really, really good drainage canals in place in order that at least the water that comes in through the heavy rains can be taken out and evacuated to the lagoons. There's a lot of haphazard mangrove sand filling that's going on in this location. I've spoken to fishermen, to people who have been supporting their lives for, for generations from fishing
Desmond, if you
in the
can hear me,
lagoons, and they
we're
say
due
that
for
the
a
amount of
break
fish
now. If you
has
can hear
dropped
me, Desmond.
drastically because also the dredging of those lagoons causes another set of problems again. So none of these sand filling or reclamation should be done without a serious environmental impact assessment giving it approval for it to be done.
All right, Desmond, that was a nice submission from you. We're due for a break now. We're coming back to you to have more discussion. Just stay there, Desmond. We're going on a short break now, and when we return, Desmond is still with us. He's still going to talk about the plan to sustain urban city. Stay with us. All right, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange. We've been looking at sustainable cities, and our guest today has been Maja Kodumi. He's been doing justice to that. Vivian, earlier Maja Kodumi talked about the need to address the issue of transport system, which I'm still going to put to him when he comes on board. You have a situation in Lagos where you have the transport facilities being overstretched because of the population. Okay, let me put that to Maja Kodumi. Is ready. Desmond, glad to have you join us once again on Early Exchange.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, let's look at the issue of transportation. You agree with me that there's no plan to have a sustainable cities without looking at the issue of transport holistically. You have a situation in Lagos. I would like you to make reference to Lagos, where you are presently. I would like you to talk about the situation in Lagos, because when you're looking at the concept of sustainable cities, the issue of transport has to be addressed, because the 75% of carbon monoxide pollution come from motor vehicles. What's your reaction to this?
No, that's a very, very good point. You know, the reality is that not just the carbon dioxide that comes, it's also toxic. You know, if you can't lock yourself in the garage and close the doors and the windows and then turn on the engine of your car, you won't walk out of that garage alive, you know? So it's something that has to be addressed. And we need to ask ourselves the question of, you know, why hasn't this been addressed a long time ago? Not just in Lagos, globally. You know, why have we continued to allow ourselves to be addicted to this poisonous substance, which is, you know, it's quite an efficient fuel. There's no doubt about that. You know, when you burn the product of oil, it gives off, you know, energy which can be translated into locomotive power, into locomotion, you know, quite effectively. It's an efficient fuel, but it's toxic. It's deadly. It'll kill you. Ah, God forbid. If I brought a generator into your room there, into your studio, would you and William stay there? In fact, I couldn't do it. Vivian would deal with me, the kind of Bianca slap that she would slap on my face if I brought a generator there. It's deadly. It's toxic. You know? So, yeah, definitely there has to be changes. And we're so excited to see what has just recently happened in Lagos with the Blue Line, the Blue Railway Line, which is the logical way to have urban transport anyway. There's no major urban city that has even half the population of Lagos that doesn't transport most of its population by rail. And finally, Lagos is doing that. But I'm particularly excited because that blue rail line, is actually an electric line. So it's an electric rail. So the motors themselves do not produce much poison at all. However, we need to actually go and put our focus on how do they generate that electricity. It has to be generated with cleanest substance possible, and we're going to insist that the blue line should be having its electricity generated from, at the very least, gas engines, okay, gas generators, which are a lot cleaner. And eventually, you know, we might have to go and do some demonstration, like what we've done in different parts of the city for different causes. There's a few coming up soon with the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. We're going to be doing some demonstrations. We at Lufasi have done demonstrations for climate. We've done demonstrations for beach protection. And we might have to go and do demonstration for the blue line. I might have to go and tie myself to the line and insist that start producing the electricity for this blue line with clean energy. And I'm ready to make that kind of sacrifice. I know they won't run over me. At least I hope not. And I hope I'll tie myself in such a way that the electric rail will not shock me. But, you know, we need to take very firm assertive action, because we can no longer continue down this trajectory whereby, as you so rightly said, a massive amount of the pollution that the urban center is creating is coming from our transportation system. And the transportation system is running on deadly toxic substances that produce terrible atmosphere. So definitely that has to be changed. But also what has been done in some other cities is to encourage a lot more use of things like the bicycle. Now you can't just, it's difficult to ride bicycle on Lagos Street because you don't have bicycle lanes. But when we're developing new areas, especially the Lucky area, we should try to encourage that. And definitely, within just the next few years, there has to be a transition to gas powered and electric powered vehicles. It is a must. It has to be done. And we will hold the authorities accountable for this. But not only will we hold them accountable, and this is something that we all need to wake up to. Actions beget reactions. This is scriptural injunction. And I as somebody who maybe is responsible for about 30 or maybe even 50 people, the decisions I make can affect their lives. Okay, there's 50 people or so that are working for me, under me, I can affect their lives. But as a leader in government, and you make a decision that can affect the lives of millions, you have to be very, very sure for the integrity and sanctity of your spirit soul that those decisions you make affect the lives of those people very, very well. Because if it affects their lives negatively and impacts negatively upon them, this burden comes upon you. Otherwise, the scriptures are not telling us the truth. And I can never accept that. I know that the scriptures are telling us the word of God Almighty, who says that you reap what you sow. So, the leaders, we are appealing to you for our sake, but also for your sake, because life is a continuum. You're just here in this physical body temporarily. Your spirit soul will still be going somewhere, and what you do here will determine to a great extent where it will go. So do not continue to allow us going down this trajectory of using poisonous, toxic substances to pollute the atmosphere for transportation. Clean energy, electric buses, electric cars, electric trains, at the very, very least, as a transition process, those ones that are powered by compressed natural gas. Thank you. And I hope to see you guys riding a bicycle sometime soon. I'm going to check on you.
All right, we'll see about that. So there is no way you talk about sustainable cities without talking about urban planning. So we are smoothly delving into that subtopic. What does it mean to you, urban planning?
Yeah, again, it means really sitting down and making the right decisions. And this is where we can actually get what we need out of the
No,
sustainability
I was
factor, because there, there has to be architects, city planners, people who understand this whole thing. There has to be people that are empowered to sit down and draw up the plans for the urban areas. And then once the plans have been drawn up and have been approved, they must be adhered to. And this is obviously a major challenge that we are having. You can see it manifesting itself already in Abuja, where the new minister is having all kinds of headaches and nightmares about what he's going to have to do to ensure that Abuja gets back to its original plan. Although I don't know if it's correct, I heard that if he starts to demolish all those things that are not in the original plan, he might end up having to take a bulldozer to the villa, and I don't think that would go down very well. But that's just a rumor. I don't know if that's true, but but he's obviously having tremendous issues. Likewise in Lagos, people were allowed to develop in areas where there was no indication for development in the plan. And there's a reason for having these plans. But there's no point having your urban plan and then not sticking to what the plan requires. This is a total contradiction, and we need to really, snap out of this type of nonsense, this type of rubbish of, just contradicting ourselves and making fools of ourselves. We have to snap out of that. The plans can be drawn up. We have the right people. There's no doubt about that. We have all the capacity to do that. We have top architects. We have great civil engineers. We have city planners who have been drawing up good plans, and they are still trying to draw up good plans. But the plans must be adhered to. And those who don't adhere to them will have to pay the price because they're causing major, major problems. So, yeah, have your urban planning, but by all means, stick to it. Stick to what you have planned and don't just go and ignore it. This is totally unconscionable and totally unacceptable because you're causing major, major issues. But you're building on drainage areas that are supposed to be there for the water to pass out, just because it looks a little bit plain for a while. No, 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 no. We have to change our attitudes, and that's why we're calling for an actual renewal of our mind and adaptation of our consciousness to a greater thinking process.
All right, Desmond, you have a situation here in Africa, or we're quite peculiar here, where there's a disparity between the master plan and what is obtainable. Talk to us. What do you think is largely responsible for this development?
Well, I think it's just, our own attitudes.
Desmond,
The
if you can
master
hear
plan
me,
did not have.
I'm trying to ask of your thought about the development of this trend in this part of this world, whereby you have a master plan, yet you have disparity between the master plan and then what is obtainable. I'd like to have your thought in this regard. What do you think is largely responsible for this?
Yes, well, it's again, it's just it's irresponsibility that is responsible for this. How can you have a master plan? The master plans are drawn up, as I alluded to earlier, by people who have the knowledge. They have the requisite knowledge. They have a deep understanding of the technicalities of how you develop urban areas. Technicalities of where you have your green space, particularly your green space, where you have your transportation systems, where you're going to put the roads, what type of roads you're going to put in place, what type of other transportation systems you're going to put in place. Is it going to be railways? Is it going to be tramways? Is it going to be waterways? Where are they going to be running to from where? Where are you going to have your major sort of commercial areas? Where are you going to have your residential areas? Where are you going to have your market areas? Are you going to have urban spaces for developing agriculture? All these things go into the master plan. And then to just ignore to a great extent the master plan is the height of irresponsibility. It is totally unconscionable. And, we need to question ourselves that, why are we so easily capable of doing this? It is a destructive attitude, and it will only bode, pain and problem for us in the future. It already is. We can't have a master plan and then go against it. And this is a wake up call. We're actually we're actually undergoing a wake up call globally. Humanity is undergoing a wake up call. Nature is blowing very loud alarm bells at humanity and telling humanity that you can no longer continue on this pathway. And a good example of it is this issue of the master plan. So you have good people, or even some people that are not so good, but they have some good intentions, and they come together and they look at all the indices of the development of that urban area, what's going to be most beneficial for the largest group of people, And they eventually come up with a plan for that area. Then people who are maybe not quite as good as them, or even people who have some goodness, but they have maybe too much greed and selfishness in their hearts, in their consciousness. And they're thinking, this master plan, I can make some extra money here. Oh, this particular green space that's there. What is all this? If we get rid of that green space, it's going to be some good profits for me. After all, the SUV that I was able to buy from the last thing I did that was against the law is already a bit old. And when I went to the Owambe, I wasn't able to spray in dollars like I usually do. I have to get a new SUV. Then I'll go to the Owambe and I'll be spraying $100 so that they'll know that yes, I am here, I am alright, this is me, ego and pride. And it comes to a fall. Pride comes before a fall. And this is what nature is telling us very, very loudly, especially in Nigeria. There's something special about this area, this Niger area, this Nigeria. There's something special about this place because everything is exaggerated. Yes, yes. The intellectual capacity of our people, it is very, very high. Just give them a little bit of education and you will see them excel tremendously. There are so many stories of when some of our founding fathers went to universities overseas for the first time. There they were studying in a foreign language, and some of them excelled so greatly that there were some funny people in some of those universities. Some of the lecturers said, no, how can this person coming from Africa like this and do better than all of our students? Yes, because we have that mental capacity, we have the physical capacity. Who are the people that are winning in sports all over the world? There are people who came from Africa. There are people with Afrogenous links in their DNA systems. What of the music? What of the arts? We have so much tremendous capacity here. So everything is like it's exaggerated here. So as nature is warning humanity all over the world, in Nigeria of a place, the warning is becoming even more stringent, even louder, that you have to change your attitudes. Your selfishness, your greed, your self-centeredness, this attitude of me, myself, I can do what I want. I can change it. A master plan. I beg, we'll get rid of that green space, even that lagoon area, even that space that's meant to evacuate the water. We'll get rid of it. I beg, yeah, there's money for me, and I can buy the new SUV. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But is that what you're going to drive to try to get through the gates of heaven? So it's a call to wake up. Nature is just telling us that we have to change our ways, that we have to wake up to the new reality, which is that she's not tolerating our nonsense anymore. Wake up, humanity.
As we wrap this up, Desmond, you talked earlier on about the mangrove, which you called poto poto. It's very rich in periwinkle, and you have women go there to pick this periwinkle and sell. So it serves as, a source of livelihood for some of these women. But when it's reclaimed now to build houses, I mean, their source of income is destroyed, right? But then when you're talking about sustainable cities, you have three major aspects: the economic, the social, and the environmental. How do you merge these three together so that it works seamlessly without any suffering at the expense of the other?
That is the key, because it's how you start it that is going to continue and will determine how it ends. So it has to be started well. And again, we're going back to the master plan. You got to bring the right kind of strategies. You got to bring the right sort of people and more consultation with the local communities as well. Don't just assume that you know everything. You have the data. How many people are actually relying on those periwinkles? How many people are relying on the other aspects that come from those mangrove areas? Have you discussed with them? Have you found a way, discussing with scientists and agronomists on how you can still preserve those periwinkle patches? And I know why you particularly are talking about periwinkles because I heard from good information that you're actually a periwinkle specialist. So you cook very beautiful, fantastic periwinkles. I've never tasted it, but one day, by God's grace, I'll taste your periwinkle. But in the meantime, we really, really need to get the right people in place for this master plan. People who understand the privilege of the job description, which is you are a civil servant. That is, you are there to serve the civilian population. What a privilege that is, that you are endowed with that capacity or that position to serve multitudes of people, to bring goodness, to bring help, to bring hope into the lives of multitudes of people. What a privilege. Because if you do this well, it comes back on you. It comes back for you. It elevates your spiritual status so that you can go to a far, far better place than where you came from. So the good thing is to plan it properly. That's the really good thing that you need to do, is to ensure that it's very, very well planned and take into consideration the various services that these various aspects of the location that you want to move into, uh, those services have to be maintained. They have to be maintained. The flood release capacity of the mangroves, they have to be maintained. If it's a drier area, okay, that dry area, is it prone to erosion? If it's prone to erosion because you're going to remove some of the trees, you better make sure that in those areas that are prone to erosion, you keep the vegetation there because that's what's keeping the soil in place. It's the roots of the vegetation. Another of the services that the trees and the plants give us, apart from the oxygen and the water and the food, they stabilize the soil. So is it an area that is maybe on a sloping trajectory that can be prone to erosion? Well, make sure that you keep your vegetation intact there. So the planning has to go on for quite a while. And then also you can have futuristic thinking. If you're in a place like Lagos, where you know there's a lot of water, these days there's a technology is developed enough to actually put habitats on stilts. In fact, in some places they've been doing it for ages anyway. The Makoko and places like that, they're built on wooden stilts. But you can have it done on far more durable, sustainable type of structures that you will have people actually living on top of the water, but not claiming the water, not claiming the mangrove for where they are. The main thing is it has to be done with the reality in mind that whatever we're developing, whatever we're doing, must be done sustainably. It must be done in harmony with nature, which is our constituted, designated role as human beings. And if we can't live in harmony with nature, then she'll push us aside. Don't be deluded that because we have some little control with our technology over nature, that we can just control her and do anything. Not at all, not at all. When some of those hurricanes were hitting America, a classic example is the Hurricane Katrina, where they lost thousands of lives as a result of this hurricane. They knew when the hurricane would come. They knew exactly where the hurricane would come. And with all the moonwalking, space exploring technology, they were not able to divert the direction of that hurricane by 1 centimeter, and they couldn't slow it down by even half a second. So don't be fooled into thinking that we have that kind of control over nature. We do not. And we need to subject ourselves to her and we need to work in harmony with her. So, in the planning processes, that should be foremost in the minds of the planners that what we're planning, are we planning it in a way that it will be sustainable and harmonious with nature? Or to put it in another way, as we do in Lufasi Park, which is a wonderful, wonderful spot just after Aja on the Lekki Expressway. Are we doing it in a way that is loving to nature?
This is a good place to land, right? Insightful as usual. Thank you for coming on board Early Exchange. We hope to see you again not too long from now.
My pleasure.
Thank you so
And one
much.
of these days, I'll get to chop your periwinkle.
Absolutely. So we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we will be taking a look at rural migration and challenges. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere.
On social media, many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. We had a very interesting session, and in one of the sessions, there was a role play about a case study on CWG PLC, which is a company that I founded. And the case was written by Columbia Business School to discuss a point about venturing, about entrepreneurship, and about funding for the enterprise. And the case ended on the question, should Austin Okere take the venture capital investment or should he reject it? Just a little bit of background. So this is a company, CWG, in 2005 that was doing very well. It was riding on the back of the Y2K that just happened at the turn of the century, was riding on the back of the telecom boom that happened immediately after the civilian government of BJ and GSM was launched, was riding on the back of the bank consolidation in 2005 that was done by Governor Soludo. And in each of these booms, CWG had positioned and taken good advantage. So this is not a company that was in dire need of cash or was desperate in 2005. But we had a plan to list our shares on the stock market, and we thought that the best way to do it was to first do either a private placement or, better still, to do a venture capital fundraise so that they will bring discipline into our operations, governance, strengthen our governance, and of course, bring more technical knowledge. And if people saw that this company was invested in you, probably it will make the listing on the stock exchange more attractive. The issue here is at what price? And I remember that I've discussed something similar on this on social media, where many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. So if I use CWG as a case study, the case that was written by Columbia was that there was an offer of $8 million for 25% of the company, putting the valuation post at $32 million. Make no mistake, the Treasury bill's interest rate is 15% sometimes. Now, if someone is going to bring his money to invest in your company, he's looking for way more than that 15%, given that there's a high risk that his money will not come back. And the rule of thumb is that they're looking for 3 times what they brought in within 5 years. So in our case, they were going to be asking for $24 million within 5 years, or you list and give them a liquidity event or an exit. You have to check very well that this $8 million that you're taking in, you can do business in such a way that the value of the company can cough out $24 million in 5 years, regardless of exchange loss. Here is where it gets complicated. So you receive $8 million, which is converted to you in Naira. 2005 probably was about 130. Now, whether the Naira suffers devaluation or not, you're going to pay that $8 million. Now, paying $8 million 5 years later, where the Naira is maybe 250 or 260, whilst you are generating your revenue in Naira, becomes almost impossible. And if the venture capital firm then has to take assets because you can't pay, he will end up owning, of course, a big chunk of your company, nothing at all. You begin to look like a management staff in the company you founded. So in our own case, we held out and we didn't take the money. And in 2009, when we took a subsequent one, the company was valued at $55 million, plus that there'd been an exchange loss. So the company was valued much more than the $32 million, and plus the fact that in Naira terms, they would have owned more of our company. My point being, don't sell your seed. Rather, till your seeds, let it grow into a fruit, and sell at the fruit, because the fruit is plentiful. A lot of our startups rush out to sell their seed, and they sell it cheap. To complete that story, we actually then listed the company in 2013 for $90 million. Now,
All right, the discussion and the conversation is getting more interesting on early exchange. And now we'll be looking at rural-urban migration. Earlier we talked about sustainable cities, and now we want to look at rural-urban migration, to look at the factors responsible for them, the impact on the ecosystem and economic activities of the country or the state concerned. And to help us do justice to this, we have a special guest. We're being joined by Sam Oruwuje. So I'm glad to have you join us.
Good morning, Femi. My pleasure being here.
You look like a comrade this morning.
Not at all. Thank you.
Were you going to mention a particular comrade?
No, it's part of what we're talking about, you know, looking fit and then looking what you talk about. And that's what Sam has portrayed this morning.
Thank you.
Glad to have you join us once again.
My pleasure.
Now let's look at rural-urban migration. It has been a trend. Whether we like it or not, is a reality we have to deal with. Talk to us. What are the factors responsible for rural-urban migration?
Thank you very much indeed, Femi. I think before I go into the factors, we need to look at the statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics. The last detailed research that was done between 2001 and 2005, you have over 5 million Nigerians that have migrated from the rural area to cities. So if you extrapolate that figure, then you should be talking about over 20-something million Nigerians that have moved from rural area to the city. So what are the real factors? There's what you call push and pull factors. So the push factors, particularly from the rural areas, has to do with low level of infrastructure in the rural communities, lack of jobs, unemployment, are some of the push factors that pull people into the city. On the other hand, for the pull factors, you have job opportunities, beautiful city, urban transportation, and the likes pull people into the city to enhance their livelihood. So these are the two factors from the point of view of population dynamics that bring people from the rural area to the city.
You know, so what you did was to kill two birds with one stone. That's what you just did. So we're saying earlier on, Femi and I, So what happens if some of this infrastructure are built in the rural areas? What effect would that have? Do we now see an urban-rural migration?
Yes, that would be, that should be the policy. Once you're able to improve on infrastructure at the rural level, you're able to stop the tide of people moving from rural communities to the city. And they all have impact for the subject matter that you talked about earlier: sustainable city, urbanization, and urban planning. They all have implication for those who plan the city. Therefore, it's important that we reverse a greater majority of the population back to the rural area for sustainable agriculture, and that, again, will help to free some funds from the city planners back into the rural. Then the federal government has a rural electrification project. We think they should sustain this to be able to stop the tide into the cities.
All right. Vivian and I were talking about, this issue of rural migration earlier. And I remember the last time I visited my village, though I don't like calling it a village, but it's a city now.
Okay.
But the last time I visited, I observed there's this trend of young people leaving the rural areas for urban areas, like you said, looking for greener pasture. And I'm worried the impact of that on the rural communities. If the bulk of the labor force or the bulk of the younger people have to live in droves, talk to us. What will be the impact on the local communities, the economic activities in that place, and the social life in that place?
That's essentially, you'll be leaving the aging population back at the rural area. But what is key to resolve this issue is for government to have a deliberate policy to find a way to improve on the infrastructure back in those rural areas so that it can reverse the trend into the urban area. And that, again, is important, that we need to drive some people from the city, not drive in terms of in terms of finding source of livelihood, creating job in the rural areas so that people can move back into those communities to enhance agriculture and find a way to populate those areas so that we have a balanced population mechanism that sustain livelihood for everyone.
Talking about a balanced population mechanics, how well would you say the assimilation has been, the assimilation of rural dwellers into urban areas? How well has this assimilation been?
Yeah, one of the challenges, again, of urbanization, which we talked about earlier, is that when people even move to the city, they don't even move to the city center because they cannot even afford housing, even transportation. So they stay in what you call the peripheries of the city, and they become challenged in terms of when you commute between the main city centers to the peripheral environment where some of those people who have migrated from the rural area dwell. So the challenge is for urban planning, urban transportation. The city become too chaotic, and for sustainable living and environment, it becomes a challenge for urban planning people, particularly municipal authorities that are responsible for planning the city as well. So therefore, it's key that we must improve on the infrastructure at the rural level. Then we must provide incentive for people to go back to rural area, and those incentives could be, can be in form of infrastructure development, specific rural industries that can respond to employment challenges could help to reduce the tide to the city.
You talked about the impact of planning and all that, but let's make reference to this difficulty of having data or statistics. Do we really have the statistics to show the number of people moving from the rural area to the urban area? This has been a challenge over the years. For instance, people come in droves to Lagos every day, to Abuja. Do we have record of people coming to the cities? How do we maneuver this kind of challenge in order to enhance a better planning?
I think the statistics are there, but to what extent does those data speak to the actual people that move into the city? But I do know for sure that the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics have done a lot of work, and they continue to do work in terms of looking at the number of people that move from rural to urban area. There are institutes, particularly at the University of Ife, you have Institute of Demography and Population Study, that have been providing data in terms of rural-urban migration. So those data are there. To what extent do we use those data for planning is a subject for another discussion. But I think the data are there. But how do we deploy the data to improve planning mechanism across the states?
All right, let's talk about the issue of distribution and allocation of resources, whether financial resources or natural resources. For instance, you have a state who are, when it comes to natural resources, they are more endowed than the other. When it comes to facilities, you have some states who are more, who have it in abundance. For instance, Lagos compared to Osun State. Will this not be a factor to contend with, no matter how much we plan, no matter how much we come about with our urban planning? For instance, Zamfara, you have gold in Zamfara. A businessman will want to migrate there, irrespective of whether you are making plans or. So talk to us about the impact of distribution of resources, natural resources, and how it's going to affect rural-urban migration.
Okay, from the perspective of rural sociology, there's a need for industry to have a deliberate policy where they produce some of those raw materials. If you find a way to recruit people to work in those production sites, that will help to reduce the tide of how people move into the city. On the other hand, government too must find a way to develop some of those industries that were cited across the country that are not operational now, that will help to equally move people back from the city back to those rural areas. So the concept is infrastructure. Then companies that operate must have deliberate policy of recruiting people in the rural area to deal with some of those things, rather than concentrating their office administration in the city center, so that we don't have that push factor that bring people into the urban area.
Femi talked about how the young ones have left his village to Lagos.
Oh,
your city. And then what you said was that leaves the aging population behind. Let's take a look at how this affects agriculture. This leads to a fall in agricultural production, right? How does this affect the food security of a nation?
If the able-bodied men are in the city and they have left the agriculture for the Asian population, that's a challenge for national development. So what is key is that for us to be able to upscale activities in rural area, then we must, of a deliberate policy, cite industries and find a way to put a policy regime that favors agriculture so that people can move back to their communities to farm. So more mechanized agriculture practice will enhance urban-rural migration rather than rural-urban migration. So we must strike a balance. You cannot really stop people from moving. It's their human right to move. But then, once the environments are conducive, then people can go back to those rural communities. And I do know some rural communities have an improvement in terms of rural younger people going back to their community to do agricultural practice and do small and medium enterprises, particularly in the Niger Delta, where we have done some studies in the past. There seems to be some trend, people moving into a community to do businesses based on their experiences in the city. So that should be encouraged. State, local government, and the federal government must energize those policy framework that sustain urban to rural migration.
Absolutely. Femi, I was wondering if agriculture is made attractive, if you give it a second thought.
Yes, I could make it a second venture. Media is my first love, and so I could make agriculture the second.
True.
Yeah, great. Now let's look at this trend. Even in the rural settlement, you have issue of conflicts. People migrate as a result of conflicts, as a result of insecurity. And you have a situation where you have IDP camps here and there, people are displaced from their original source or their village. Now, how does this affect the issue of rural-urban migration? And then what can be done to also help the plights of those who are displaced as a result of either conflicts or insecurity?
All right, I think one of the major challenges in recent time has been the issue of conflict, and these conflicts to a very large extent are results of land degradation, competition for land is one of the overlapping instigator of conflicts. Therefore, the government must, as a matter of urgency, find a way to improve on the security situation so that people can remain in those areas. But what is important and key going forward is that most communities must find a way to live in harmony with their immediate neighbors. They know the boundary lines, their cultural boundary lines, so they must live in harmony to sustain that relationship. Therefore, security, once the security is okay, people are able to stay in those areas, because I do know that a lot of people have migrated from the extreme north down south as a result of those conflicts that have bedeviled some of those states in the north. So constantly we need to improve on security. Then we must encourage people by doing infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier.
You know, China has been noted to be the country with the largest rural-urban migration in history, right? And that is, it's no wonder, I mean, China. And one of the things they've done is to make it an advantage by improving their medical system. So in the meantime, while we try to reverse rural-urban migration in Nigeria, how do you manage it? How do you make it work in the meantime? What are some of the things you can do? Like China is using it to improve their medical system now. What can be done?
I think it's essentially about social infrastructure, social amenities. Once people can get social service back at the rural community, then people may want to leave the city back to those rural communities.
Yeah, so I'm saying in the meantime, is there an advantage? We've mainly talked about the challenges, disadvantages of rural-urban migration. But is there something you can get out of it, out of these people that are migrating to the urban area? Is there an advantage to it, like improved labor? You have, you know, improved workforce. Is there something good out of it?
In terms of people moving from rural to city, of course, that's what I call the pull factor. Job opportunities, social amenity, another infrastructure, public transportation, even the aesthetics of the city become so alluring that people don't want to go back to the rural area. On the other hand, if there's a deliberate policy in terms of the social dynamics that will make people leave the city for the rural area, that push factor that pull people into the city will have been reversed naturally, because some of those infrastructure that you're talking about are already enabled at the rural community. Then this will now make people to move back. And people are even closer to nature back in the rural community. So the depletion that has happened in the city and the kind of pollution that you have for public transportation are almost not evident in the rural area. So it's deliberate policy that can reverse that trend.
Let's talk about the trend where you have the way slums are springing up. It has been identified that rural-urban migration is also responsible for the growth of slums. You get to city, you see slums here and there. You have people coming from a particular village and they're bringing their friends, and when they get to a particular city, they form a community. How do we address this? Because it's a challenge when it comes to urban planning. You know, how do we address this? What do you expect now that these people are here? Perhaps they are being displaced. They now come into the city to form shanties, to form slums, and then they constitute a community. And that poses a challenge to urban planning. How do you react to that?
Globally, that's a major challenge to urbanization, urban planning. You have slum around the major city. So what they need to do for sustainable city, there are development paradigm that has been initiated to reverse those trends. So government can build new towns in some peripheral place to move those people from the city and find a way to build what we call social housing that can take care of the poor and the very poor of society. And I can take you back into part of what you call Lekki. There used to be a slum area. Some of the people were moved into some other areas, and it took a long while for them to be able to find a living in the new community. So government must have that social housing scheme that sustain a way to remove slum and the poor from the city center by a deliberate housing scheme that can take care of. But slum all over the world, even in Brazil, has been a major challenge to sustainable city, urban planning, and urbanization as a whole. So when the process of conurbation, where towns and cities grow together, those who are at the municipal level planning must take cognizance of the implication of rural-urban migration. So the incentive for you not to have slum in the city is to provide social houses in those rural areas and provide some form of incentive that can make them remain in their environment.
But the concern is how affordable. We're talking about this social housing and houses. How affordable will it be for the poor or the least of the poor? That's also another concern.
Once the policy is there, it will be affordable. Maybe you're building a one-bedroom apartment for people, and they can pay for those houses for over 30 to 35 years with a mortgage scheme that sustains those kind of planning mechanisms that will help to remove those slums from the city. So if it's a deliberate policy, and this has been done in Brazil, where people have been moved from the city center to some rural community by building social houses, affordable, accessible social houses, with a mortgage that will be paid for 30 to 35 years, will help to clean the city. And we have sustainable cities in the future.
Absolutely. This is a safe place to land. Thank you so much, Sam, for that very insightful one. And it's a wrap on the show this morning. Femi.
Yeah, he talked about, Sam talked about the government improving facilities in the rural areas. I hope if this is done,
I'm going to go back to my village. That was what you wanted me to say. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on Early Exchange today. We hope to be back same time, same station. Until then, I am Vivian Oguche.
And I am Femi Ayodele. Don't forget, you can do a catch-up of this program on our YouTube channel and our social media platform. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.